They say blood is thicker than water, but they forget to mention that is exactly why the knife cuts deeper. When I spotted my husband's worn leather wallet lying abandoned under my sister's bed, I did not scream. I just stared at the receipt inside for a dinner for two from the night before. He said he was working late, but that wallet was his one-way ticket out of my life. My name is Morgan. For the last 10 years, I have built my reputation at Vanguard Strategics in Boston on a single, unyielding skill. I am a senior risk assessment officer. While others see potential and profit, I see the cracks in the foundation. I scan spreadsheets worth millions of dollars looking for the single decimal point that betrays a lie. My life is built on precision and the absolute certainty that numbers do not have feelings. They only have consequences. My husband, Travis, operated in a world of aesthetics rather than absolutes. At 36, he was a senior architect at Blueprint Horizons. We had been married for 6 years, a union that looked as structurally sound as the skyscrapers he designed. He was charming, handsome in that effortless way that made waitresses linger a second too long at our table, and ostensibly devoted. But lately, the foundations had been shifting. He was always working late. He blamed it on a new high-profile contract. Just a few more weeks. "Honey," he would say, his voice dripping with exhausted sincerity. "The client is demanding impossible changes." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But facts are stubborn things, and they have a nasty habit of surfacing when you least expect them. The incident that shattered my carefully constructed reality did not happen in a boardroom. It happened in the high-rise apartment of my younger sister, Jade. At 28, Jade was everything I was not. She was an aspiring Instagram model who measured her self-worth in likes and engagement metrics. She had borrowed my vintage emerald silk dress for a photo shoot and forgotten to return it. Since I needed it for a corporate gala, I drove over to her place in the Seaport district. Jade was not home. I used the spare key she had given me for emergencies. The apartment smelled of expensive perfume and stale ambition. I walked straight to her bedroom, expecting to find the dress thrown carelessly over a chair. Instead, as I knelt to check if it had fallen behind the nightstand, the toe of my boot hit something solid under the bed. I reached underneath and pulled out a worn brown leather object. My breath hitched in my throat. I knew the texture of that leather better than my own skin. It was Travis's wallet. For a moment, my brain refused to process the visual data. It was an anomaly, a glitch. Travis was at work. Jade was my sister. This object did not belong in this coordinate system. I opened it, my fingers trembling slightly before my professional training kicked in. Inside, staring back at me, was his Blueprint Horizons access card. Behind it was a receipt. I pulled the slip of paper out. It was from a romantic Italian bistro in the North End. The timestamp read 8:30 in the evening, yesterday. The bill was for two, a bottle of Barolo, truffle pasta, tiramisu. The data points began to align, forming a picture I had refused to see. Last night, Travis had stumbled through our front door at 2 a.m. He had reeked of whiskey and peppermint. I remembered his words clearly. He had slumped against the doorframe, loosening his tie with feigned exhaustion. God, Morgan, that client is a nightmare, he had groaned, rubbing his temples. We were stuck in the conference room until midnight going over blueprints. "I'm so sorry I missed dinner." He had looked me in the eye when he said it. He had kissed my forehead, standing in my sister's bedroom, holding the proof of his perjury. I waited for the tears. I waited for the rage to make me scream and tear the room apart, but nothing came. Instead, a cold, familiar sensation washed over me. It was the same feeling I got when I found a hidden offshore account in a client's portfolio. The emotion evaporated, replaced by a terrifying clarity. This was no longer a marriage. It was a failing asset. It was a liability that needed to be liquidated. So that is how you want to play it. Travis, I whispered to the empty room. You think you are clever? I did not throw the wallet. I did not call him. I pulled out my phone and took high-resolution photographs of the wallet, the ID, and the receipt. I captured the location context, ensuring the distinctive rug of Jade's bedroom was visible in the frame. Then, with the steady hands of a surgeon, I slid the receipt back into the slot. I placed the wallet back under the bed, adjusting it until it sat exactly where my boot had struck it. I stood up and smoothed down my skirt. I left the dress. I left the apartment. I locked the door behind me. As I walked to the elevator, my heart rate was perfectly steady. I was not a scorned wife anymore. I was an auditor, and I had just opened the most important case file of my career. I stood in the doorway of our master bedroom, watching Travis sleep. He lay on his back, one arm thrown carelessly over his eyes, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm that used to comfort me. Now, I looked at him not as a wife, but as a forensic pathologist examining a corpse for the cause of death. The cause was betrayal. Every time he had kissed me goodbye in the last few months, every time he had brought me coffee in bed, it had been a performance. He was not a husband. He was an actor who had forgotten his lines but kept smiling at the audience anyway. He stirred, patted the nightstand, and then frantically patted his pockets. His eyes snapped open, wide with sudden panic. He jumped out of bed, tearing through his discarded clothes on the floor, tossing his trousers aside. "Honey." "What is wrong?" I asked, keeping my voice even, leaning against the doorframe with my arms crossed. He froze, looking up at me with the guilty eyes of a child caught stealing candy. "My wallet. I can't find my wallet," he stammered, his face pale. "I must have left it at the office last night. God, I am such an idiot." I walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. It took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil from his touch. "Maybe we should call the bank and cancel your cards. Just to be safe. Identity theft is a nightmare to fix." No, he said too quickly, pulling away to button his shirt with trembling fingers. "I mean, the office is secure. The cleaners probably found it and put it on my desk. I will just drive over and get it." "Don't worry." He rushed out of the house 10 minutes later, skipping breakfast. I watched his car pull away, knowing exactly where he was going. He was not going to the office. He was driving to the Seaport District to retrieve his life from under my sister's bed. An hour later, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen flashed Jade. I stared at it for 5 seconds, listening to the vibration against the granite, before answering. "Hey, big sis," her voice chirped, sugary and bright. It was a tone she only used when she wanted money or information. "I was just thinking about you. We haven't had a spa day in forever. Do you want to go get facials this weekend?" My treat. I almost laughed. Jade never treated anyone to anything. She was fishing. She was checking to see if I had come by to get the dress, if I had seen the wallet. "That sounds lovely." "Jade," I said, injecting a false warmth into my voice that matched hers. "I actually meant to swing by your place yesterday for that dress, but work got crazy. I never made it." I could practically hear her shoulders sag with relief through the phone line. "Oh, that is a shame. Well, the dress is right here whenever you want it. Just let me know before you come over." "Okay, the place is a mess. Love you too," I said, and ended the call. I felt bile rise in the back of my throat. The pieces of the puzzle began to lock together. Travis had mentioned Jade a lot recently. Jade needs help with her new studio layout. Jade wants advice on lighting for her content. It was the perfect cover, the helpful brother-in-law and the ambitious sister-in-law. That afternoon, Travis texted me. "Found it." It slid under the passenger seat of the car. Crisis averted. I stared at the message. Another lie. He had driven to Jade's, retrieved it, and constructed this new reality. He was layering deceit upon deceit like cheap paint over mold. I sat at my desk, opening 2 windows on my laptop. On the left, our shared digital calendar. On the right, Jade's Instagram feed. I went back 3 months. I started cross-referencing. October 4th, Travis's calendar, late site visit. West End, Jade's post a photo of a wine glass. Caption cozy night in. November 12th, Travis's calendar client dinner with the developers. Jade's post, a photo of 2 shadows on a wall. Caption secret projects. Then I saw it. A post from 2 weeks ago on her story highlights. It was a blurry, artistic selfie taken in a mirror. She was wearing a charcoal gray cashmere scarf. My stomach dropped. I had that exact scarf. I thought I had left it on the subway last month. But there it was, wrapped around my sister's neck, and in the corner of the frame, cut off but unmistakable, was a shoulder clad in a blue Oxford shirt. Travis owned that exact shirt. I had ironed it for him. I closed the laptop. My hands were cold, but my mind was on fire. I could confront them now. I could scream and throw the photos in their faces. But they would deny it. They would gaslight me. They would say I was crazy and jealous. No. A wallet was suspicious, and a scarf was circumstantial. But neither was a conviction. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed to destroy them completely, not just scratch the surface. I decided then and there that I would not be the weeping victim in their story. I would be the villain in their nightmare. I was going to play a game of cat and mouse, but they did not know the cat was already in the room. I treated the next 48 hours not as a grieving wife, but as a senior auditor conducting a hostile takeover. If Travis wanted to live a double life, I would document both of them down to the last kilobyte. My first move was physical surveillance. Travis had an old iPad he claimed he used for sketching initial concepts, often taking it with him on his so-called site visits. While he was in the shower, I installed a high-end parental control application that ran silently in the background. It gave me real-time GPS tracking and mirrored his screen activity to my phone. He thought he was smart, but he was technologically illiterate compared to someone who hunted corporate embezzlers for a living. Next, I acquired a voice-activated recording device no larger than a stick of gum. I sat on the floor of my walk-in closet with his leather laptop bag. I carefully undid the stitching of the inner lining, slipped the device inside the padding, and sewed it back up with matching thread. He never checked that pocket. It was the perfect listening post. With the physical traps set, I moved to the digital realm. Travis assumed that because I worked 60 hours a week, I never looked at our shared cloud storage. He counted on my exhaustion. That was his mistake. I logged into the account and bypassed the main folders. I went straight to the system trash and the hidden subdirectories, deep within a folder labeled Archived Tax Refs. I found a folder simply named Project J. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hand remained steady on the mouse. I double-clicked. Project J was not a building. It was a gallery of betrayal. Hundreds of photos flooded my screen. There was Travis and Jade at a vineyard in Napa Valley from last month, the weekend he told me he was at a structural engineering conference in Chicago. There was Jade wearing diamond earrings that I knew we could not afford. There were videos of them in hotel rooms, laughing and drinking champagne. I felt sick, but I pushed the nausea down and opened a new spreadsheet. I needed to follow the money. I logged into our joint savings account, the one we had been building for 5 years to buy a vacation home in the Berkshires. On the surface, the balance looked healthy. But when I drilled down into the transaction history, I saw the hemorrhage, small transfers, $2,000 here, $3,000 there, all sent to a dummy vendor account listed as J. M. Interiors, Jade Marie. He was not just sleeping with my sister. He was financing her lifestyle with our future. He was stealing from me to pay her credit card debt. Later that evening, while Travis was in the shower again, I retrieved the recorder from his bag. I plugged it into my laptop and put on my noise-canceling headphones. The audio file from his drive home was crystal clear. I heard the hum of the engine, the radio, and then the car's Bluetooth connecting to a call. "Hey, baby," Travis's voice said, sounding relaxed and happy. Did she suspect anything about the wallet? Jade's voice replied through the car speakers. No, not a clue. Travis laughed, a sound that made my blood run cold. Morgan is so oblivious. She is just a workaholic robot. As long as she has her spreadsheets, she does not notice anything real. Good, Jade purred. I need that tuition for the design course by Friday. Travis, don't make me wait. I will move the money tomorrow. He promised. Just be patient. Once you land a rich guy to take care of you, I can finally divorce her. But right now, we need her salary to keep the mortgage paid while I fund your brand. We just have to endure the old bore a little longer. I took off the headphones. The sadness that had been lingering in my chest vanished completely. In its place, a cold, hard diamond of contempt formed. They were not just lovers. They were parasites. They were laughing at me while feeding off my labor. I did not smash the computer. I did not confront him. Instead, I made 3 copies of every photo, every bank statement, and every audio file. I saved them onto 3 separate encrypted hard drives. One went into my safe at work. One went to a safety deposit box at the bank. The third stayed in my purse. I looked at the folder on my screen one last time before closing it. Travis thought he was an architect building a new life. He did not realize he had just handed the demolition orders to the best in the business. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had always been a performance. But this week, the curtain rose on a farce so grotesque I almost applauded. Jade arrived 20 minutes late, dragging a handsome but bewildered-looking man named Eric in her wake. Eric was a tech entrepreneur, the kind of guy who wore sustainable sneakers with a suit and probably thought blockchain could save the rainforest. He was polite, wealthy, and completely oblivious to the fact that he was nothing more than a human shield. Travis and Jade played their parts with sickening precision. They sat across from each other, maintaining a polite, in-law distance above the table. They made small talk about traffic and weather, but I was not looking at their faces. I was looking at the tablecloth. Every few minutes, the fabric would ripple. Once, a foot brushed against my calf before quickly retracting, seeking its intended target. They were playing footsie right under the nose of the husband she was cheating on and the boyfriend she was using. I have to say, Eric announced halfway through the roast chicken, beaming at Travis. I am just so impressed by this family. Jade has told me everything about how supportive you have been. Travis, the advice you gave her on the fashion line launch, it is genius. I set my fork down. The metal clinked loudly against the china. Fashion line, I asked, keeping my voice light. Oh, yes, Jade chimed in, her eyes darting nervously to Travis. I did not want to jinx it. Morgan, but I am launching Jade Marie Couture. Travis helped me structure the initial capital. Just some investment advice. Eric nodded enthusiastically. Advice. He practically built the portfolio that seed money was crucial. $150,000 does not just appear out of thin air, right? The room seemed to tilt on its axis. $150,000. That was the exact amount in our joint high-yield savings account. That was the money for our future home. Travis had not just moved money around, he had drained us dry to fund a vanity project for a girl who thought haute couture was buying something without a coupon. I looked at Travis. He was sweating. It is just a loan. Morgan, high interest return. I forced a smile so wide it made my jaw ache. That is wonderful, I had no idea. You know, since you two have handled the financial side, I would love to contribute to the engagement party. Consider it my early wedding gift. Jade's eyes lit up. Really? You would do that? Absolutely, I said. Let me handle the media and visuals. I have a great team at the agency. I will put together a slideshow, handle the music, the lighting, everything. You just focus on looking beautiful. Travis looked relieved. He thought I was the gullible wife. desperate to buy her way back into their good graces. That would be great, honey. It would take a lot off my plate. Perfect, I said. Just send me the login credentials for the venue's AV system. I want to make sure the projection is flawless. They agreed instantly. They handed me the weapon I would use to execute them, and they thanked me for it. Later, while Jade was showing off her ring to our mother, I cornered Eric in the kitchen while he was pouring a glass of wine. "Eric," I said softly, leaning against the counter, "you seem like such a smart guy. I just hope Jade is not overwhelming you. Her previous financial entanglements were quite messy. Did she tell you about the credit card debt Travis had to clear up before the investment?" Eric's smile faltered. "What debt? She said she sold her previous company." "Oh," I said, feigning embarrassment. "I probably shouldn't have said anything. I am sure it is all fine now. Just maybe check the incorporation papers for that fashion line. You know, due diligence." I patted his arm and walked away, leaving him staring into his wine glass with the first dawn of suspicion in his eyes. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in my home office with the door locked. I opened the video editing software and dragged the folder named Project J into the timeline. I had hundreds of photos, hours of audio, and the dashcam footage. I began to cut. I synced the audio of them mocking me with photos of them spending my money. I adjusted the transitions. I balanced the sound levels. I was not just making a video, I was crafting a masterpiece of destruction. Every frame was a bullet, and I was making sure the chamber was fully loaded. I contacted Silas Thorne on Monday morning. Silas was the most vicious divorce attorney in Boston, a man I had locked horns with across a boardroom table during a hostile merger 3 years ago. He respected only two things: brute force and billable hours. When I laid the file on his mahogany desk, a thick binder containing bank transfers, call logs, and geotagged photographs, he did not offer me sympathy. He offered me a shark's grin. "This is not just a divorce." "Morgan," Silas said, leafing through the forensic accounting I had prepared, "this is an execution. You want him destitute, I want him erased." I replied calmly. "I want the house, the car, the pension, and I want the clause invoked that states infidelity nullifies any claim he has to my assets." "Done," Silas said, closing the binder. "By the time we are finished, he will be lucky if he can afford a bus ticket out of town." I spent the next 2 days silently appraising our life. I had the house valued while Travis was at work. I cataloged every piece of furniture, every painting, every investment. I built a financial fortress around myself, ensuring that when the walls came down, I would be the only one left standing. But the final nail in their coffin came from another audio recording. It was captured late Tuesday night. Travis and Jade were in his car again, parked 2 streets away from my house. What if Eric finds out Travis's voice asked, sounding anxious, about the timing? "He won't," Jade's voice replied, dismissive and cold. "I told him we were careful. He thinks it is a miracle. The baby is just a trap. Travis. It locks Eric down. It secures his family trust fund for 18 years. But you know the truth. This thing inside me might have his name on the birth certificate. But my heart, it is yours." I sat in the dark, the headphones pressing against my ears. Jade was pregnant. She was bringing an innocent child into this web of lies just to secure a paycheck. It was a level of depravity I had not anticipated until that moment. I had felt a flicker of pity for Eric, the collateral damage in my war. Now, that pity hardened into a sense of duty. Eric needed to know. He was walking into a slaughterhouse thinking it was a nursery. On Wednesday, Travis packed a bag. "I have to go do a site survey in Vermont," he told me, avoiding my eyes as he folded his shirts. 3 days, just checking the structural integrity of that old ski lodge renovation. I hate to leave right before the party." "I understand," I said, smoothing the collar of his shirt. "Work comes first." I knew exactly where they were going. The GPS tracker showed they were headed to a luxury spa resort in the Berkshires, not a ski lodge. It was their bachelorette getaway, alone in the house. I finalized my masterpiece. I exported the video file, naming it Jade and Eric's Journey to Happiness, MP4. It looked innocent enough on the desktop, a digital Trojan horse waiting to be opened. Then, I turned my attention to Blueprint Horizons. I used the keylogger data to access Travis's work email from my laptop. I drafted a new email addressed to the entire board of directors and the HR department. It was a letter of resignation, effective immediately, but I added a creative twist. I attached a document outlining several accounting errors in his recent projects, errors I had genuinely found in his sloppy records, and framed the email as a confession of guilt due to overwhelming conscience. I scheduled the email to send automatically at 7 in the evening on Saturday, exactly when the toasts would begin. Finally, I went to my closet. I pushed aside the sensible gray and navy suits I wore to intimidate CEOs. I reached for the back, pulling out a garment bag I had not touched in years. Inside was a dress of crimson silk, structured and sharp, with a neckline that demanded attention. It was not a dress for a wife. It was a dress for a woman who had burned the forest down to let new things grow. I held the red silk against my body in the mirror. Game over. Travis, I whispered. I was ready for war, and I was going to look spectacular while winning it. The engagement party was held in the grand ballroom of the Harbor View Hotel, a venue that smelled of old money and fresh lilies. Outside, the dark waters of Boston Harbor churned against the docks. But inside, the air was still and perfumed with expensive cologne. 300 guests filled the room. They were the elite of the city tech investors, venture capitalists, and the social climbers who desperately wanted to be them. It was a perfect stage for a tragedy disguised as a celebration. Jade was the centerpiece of the evening. She wore a white satin gown that hugged every curve, looking for all the world like the innocent, blushing bride-to-be. Around her neck sat a diamond pendant that caught the light with every breath she took. I recognized it immediately. It cost $4,000. It was bought 2 weeks ago using the secondary credit card attached to my account, the one Travis swore he had cut up years ago. She was literally wearing my stolen labor around her neck, smiling at guests who thought she was a self-made woman. Travis was playing the role of the devoted brother-in-law with nauseating dedication. He was everywhere at once, directing the waiters, adjusting the floral arrangements, and clapping Eric on the back with a little too much force. But I was watching his eyes. Every time Eric turned his head to greet a guest, Travis's gaze would slide over to Jade. It was not a look of familial affection. It was a look of dark, hungry possession. He looked at her the way a man looks at a prize he has stolen and is terrified of losing. I made them wait. I arrived 20 minutes after the appetizers were served. When the heavy oak doors swung open for me, the room seemed to go quiet. I was not wearing the beige or navy tones of a supportive sister. I was wearing red, blood red. The silk dress was sharp as a blade, cutting a silhouette that demanded attention. As I walked down the grand staircase, I saw Travis stiffen. He adjusted his tie, his face paling slightly. He sensed the shift in the atmosphere, the sudden drop in pressure that precedes a hurricane, but he could not identify the source. My parents were beaming. My father took the microphone first, raising a glass of champagne. "To my beautiful daughters," he announced, his voice thick with emotion. "Morgan and Jade. They have always been inseparable. It warms a father's heart to see how much they support each other. Morgan, thank you for making your sister's night so magical." The crowd applauded. I stood near the bar, sipping sparkling water, letting the irony wash over me. They had no idea that the support they were toasting was actually theft and betrayal. Eric found me a few moments later. He looked genuinely happy, his face flushed with excitement and gratitude. He looked like a puppy that had just been adopted, completely unaware that he was about to be put down. Morgan, he exclaimed, grabbing my hand. This is incredible. The lighting, the music, everything. I cannot thank you enough. I feel like the luckiest man alive. She is everything I ever wanted. I looked at him. I looked at the man who was about to have his heart ripped out in front of 300 people. It was a mercy killing. Really. Better a sharp pain now than a slow death over a lifetime of lies. You are a smart investor. Eric, I said, my voice low and smooth. But in business and in life, due diligence is everything. You deserve to know the absolute truth about the commodity you are about to invest your entire life into. He frowned, confused by my choice of words. Commodity I don't. Before he could ask for clarification, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The hum of conversation died down. The master of ceremonies stepped into the spotlight, his voice booming through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, the bride's sister has prepared a very special surprise. Please turn your eyes to the main screen for a tribute to the happy couple. The massive 300-inch screen descended from the ceiling. The room fell silent, waiting for a montage of childhood photos and romantic moments. I took a step back into the shadows, folded my arms, and waited for the show to begin. The ballroom plunged into darkness. The sudden absence of light sucked the air out of the room, leaving only the hum of anticipation. Then, the massive 300-inch LED screen behind the stage exploded into life. Elegant, curling script appeared in soft white against a black background. What is true love? A collective sigh of adoration swept through the crowd. A gentle acoustic guitar melody began to play, filling the silence with saccharine sweetness. The first few minutes were a masterclass in deception. I had compiled photos of Jade as a toddler, her first day of school, and candid shots of her laughing with our parents. I watched from the shadows near the emergency exit. The tension in Travis's shoulders evaporated. I saw him lean over and whisper something into Jade's ear, probably a joke about how he had worried for nothing. They smiled, secure in their arrogance, believing I was still the foolish, supportive sister. Then, the music stopped. It did not fade out. It was cut with a violent, jarring scratch that sounded like a knife dragging across a chalkboard. The screen flickered. A digital glitch tore across the smiling face of my sister, distorting her features into a grotesque mask. The audience gasped, thinking it was a technical error, but it was not an error. The screen went black for a heartbeat, and then a single, high-resolution image appeared. It was the brown leather wallet. It was magnified so clearly that every scratch on the leather was visible. Next to it was the receipt, the date and time highlighted in a glowing red box. The room was confused, but Travis was not. I saw his head snap up, his body going rigid. Before he could react, the image vanished, replaced by shaky, grainy footage. It was the dashcam video. I had remotely activated the interior camera of his SUV. The angle was wide, capturing the front seats perfectly. The timestamp in the corner read, 2 weeks ago. On the screen, Travis and Jade were not just talking. They were clawing at each other, their mouths locked in a desperate, hungry kiss that left no room for interpretation. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum so profound that when a waiter near the front dropped a tray of champagne flutes, the sound of shattering glass cracked through the air like a gunshot. Jade stood frozen on the stage. All the blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax figure. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked at the screen, then at Eric, then back at the screen, her eyes wide with terror. I did not let up. I cranked the audio levels on the mixing board to the maximum. The speakers roared with the sound of their voices, stripping away any doubt. We just have to stick to the plan. Jade's voice boomed through the ballroom, distorted slightly by the car's acoustics, but undeniably hers. Lousy Eric thinks he is getting a trophy wife. Once I marry him, I will use his family trust to pay back the money you stole from Morgan. We will be rich, Travis. We just have to be patient." The crowd erupted into hushed, horrified whispers. Eric was staring at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief. Travis snapped. The survival instinct of a cornered animal took over. He lunged from his seat, his face purple with rage. "Turn it off," he screamed, his voice cracking. "It is fake. Turn it off." He sprinted toward the control booth, intending to rip the cables out of the wall. But I had prepared for this. I had hired 2 private security contractors, former military, and dressed them in the hotel's event staff uniforms. As Travis rushed the stage, they stepped out from behind the curtains. They moved with efficient brutality, intercepting him and pinning his arms behind his back before he could take 5 steps. "Let me go!" Travis howled, thrashing against their grip. "This is illegal." "You can't!" I did not stop the video. The final image faded onto the screen. It was a screenshot of a text message conversation between Jade and her best friend. On the left was a photo of a positive pregnancy test. On the right was Jade's reply. The text was magnified, towering over the guests like a divine judgment. "The baby is Travis's. But do not worry. Eric will be the one to sign the birth certificate and pay for the college tuition. He is too stupid to know the difference." The video cut to black. The lights stayed off. For 3 seconds, the only sound in the room was the heavy, ragged breathing of 300 people who had just witnessed a murder. Not of a body, but of a reputation. The silence that followed the video was heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. And when the thunder finally broke, it was violent. Eric, the gentle, soft-spoken man who had spent the entire evening singing Jade's praises, walked across the stage. His movements were stiff, robotic. Jade reached out to him, her mascara already running down her cheeks, her hand trembling as she tried to touch his arm. "Eric, baby, please, let me explain," she sobbed, her voice high and thin. Eric did not let her explain. He raised his hand and struck her across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the ballroom, sharp and sickeningly loud. Jade stumbled back, clutching her cheek, shock replacing the terror in her eyes. Eric reached into his pocket, pulled out the velvet box containing the engagement ring, the one he had taken off to show his mother moments before, and threw it hard into her face. "We are done," Eric said, his voice shaking with a rage that was terrifying because it was so quiet. In the front row, the reality of the situation finally hit my parents. My mother let out a strangled cry and collapsed into my father's arms. Her legs simply gave out. She could not process the image of her golden child conspiring to destroy her eldest daughter. Waiters rushed over to help my father drag her out of the ballroom, their faces burning with shame. They did not look back at Jade. They did not look at Travis. They just wanted to escape the stench of the rot I had exposed. Travis, still pinned by the security guards, began to scream. He thrashed like a wild animal caught in a trap, his face slick with sweat. "It is fake," he bellowed, straining against the arms holding him. "It is AI. It is a deep fake video. Morgan made it up. She is jealous. Don't believe her." I walked up the stairs to the stage. The click of my heels on the hardwood was the only sound in the room. I picked up the microphone Eric had dropped. I looked down at my husband, the man I had shared a bed with for 6 years, and felt absolutely nothing. "Is this AI too, Travis?" I asked calmly. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a stack of papers. I signaled the waiters, who began distributing copies to the VIP tables. I walked over to Eric's parents, who were sitting in stunned silence, and placed a thick file in front of them. "These are the bank statements," I said, my voice amplified clearly through the speakers. "They detail every single transfer from our joint savings account to an account managed by Jade, $150,000, stolen, And here are the credit card statements for the jewelry Jade is wearing right now. The room erupted. Guests whipped out their phones. The flashes of cameras turned the ballroom into a strobe-lit nightmare. They were live streaming the destruction of a socialite. I saw the comments flooding in on a phone screen in the front row. Jade Marie exposed. Gold digger. Her reputation, carefully curated over years of filters and hashtags, was evaporating in seconds. Jade fell to her knees, grabbing the hem of Eric's jacket. Eric, I love you. The baby. Think of the baby. Eric looked down at her with pure disgust. I am suing you for fraud, he said, stepping away so she fell forward onto the stage floor. And if you come near me or my family again, I will have you arrested. I turned back to Travis. He had stopped screaming. He was staring at the bank statements in the hands of Eric's father, realizing there was no way to spin this. You said you were working late tonight, Travis, I asked, smiling pleasantly. Well, I have good news. You will have plenty of free time from now on. I accessed your email account 10 minutes ago. A resignation letter was sent to the entire board of directors at Blueprint Horizons. It details your gross negligence and the embezzlement of company funds to pay for your mistress's lifestyle. Travis went pale. You can't do that. It is already done. I replied. At that moment, the double doors at the back of the room burst open. 4 uniformed police officers marched in. I had called them an hour ago, reporting a significant financial fraud and theft scheme involving over $100,000. Travis Miller, one of the officers, shouted. Travis slumped in the grip of the security guards. He did not fight as the police cuffed him. He looked at me one last time, his eyes pleading, begging for the wife who used to fix all his mistakes. But that wife was dead. I stood center stage in my red dress, watching the flashing blue lights reflect off the diamond chandeliers, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I walked out of the Harborview Hotel while the chaos was still echoing off the crystal chandeliers. Behind me, the sounds of my husband and my sister tearing each other apart faded into the background noise of the city. I did not look back. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver my address. When I arrived, the house was dark, but it felt different. It was secure. I had hired a locksmith to come by while I was at the party. I slid my new key into the lock, the metal turning with a satisfying click. I went inside, locked the door behind me, and slept for 12 hours straight. The next morning, the sun was shining, and I had an appointment with Silas. I sat in his office, drinking the best espresso I had ever tasted, and laid the hard drive on his desk. The infidelity clause, I said simply. Trigger it. Silas plugged in the drive, scrolled through the files for a minute, and then leaned back with a satisfied grin. With this amount of documentation, it is a slam dunk. Morgan. He violated the morality clause of the prenuptial agreement 20 times over. He does not get the house. He does not get the car. He does not get a single penny of alimony. He leaves the marriage with exactly what he brought into it, which, if I recall correctly, was a pile of student debt and a used sedan. The fallout for Jade was swifter and much louder. Eric was a gentleman, but his lawyers were pit bulls. He sued Jade for the return of the engagement ring, the capital he had invested in her fake fashion line, and even the cost of the gifts he had given her, citing fraud. The internet, the deity Jade had worshipped for so long, turned on her with vicious delight. The video of her confession went viral. She was not just canceled, she was obliterated. Within 48 hours, she had deleted all her social media accounts. Bankrupt and humiliated. She fled Boston in the middle of the night to hide in our aunt's basement in rural Ohio. My parents came to see me 2 days later. My mother looked frail, her eyes swollen from crying. My father sat on the edge of my sofa, wringing his hands. "We are so sorry." "Morgan," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. We just wanted her to be happy. We thought if we helped her, she would eventually settle down. We didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't look, I said, keeping my voice even. You fed a monster because it was easier than disciplining a child. But the feeding stops now. If you send her a single dollar, you lose me. Forever. My father nodded, tears streaming down his face. We promise. No more. We are done enabling her. Travis tried to fight, but he was fighting a war with a stick against a tank. He was not just fired from Blueprint Horizons for the resignation email. I had sent an anonymous package to their internal audit committee detailing how he had been inflating material costs on his projects and pocketing the difference a little side hustle I had discovered while digging through his laptop. He was blacklisted. No firm in the city would hire a thief. He tried to contact me a week later from a burner phone. I let it go to voicemail and listened to it later with a glass of wine in my hand. Morgan, please, you have to answer me. His voice cracked, sounding desperate and broken. It was her. She seduced me. I never loved her. I was weak. Please, I have nowhere to go. I am sleeping in my car. I deleted the message without a second thought. I did not block the number. I just forwarded it to Silas. Let him bill Travis for the time it took to listen to it. I sold the house. It held too many memories of a life that was a lie. It sold in 3 days for 20% over the asking price. I took that money, combined it with my savings and the divorce settlement, and bought a penthouse in the Seaport district. It was a place Travis had always hated. He said it was too modern, too expensive, too cold. I stood in the center of the living room, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Boston Harbor. The water was dark and calm. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize, but I knew the author immediately. You ruined my life. I hope you are happy. I took a sip of my wine, the red liquid dark and rich on my tongue. I typed out my reply slowly, savoring every letter. No, I just turned on the lights. You are the one who looks ugly when the room is bright. I hit send, then turned off the phone. I had a flight to catch in the morning. Europe was waiting, and for the first time in my life, I was not waiting for anyone. 3 months had passed since the night the sky fell. I sat at a corner table in my favorite cafe on Newberry Street, the afternoon sun warming the marble surface. In front of me lay the final decree of divorce. The ink was still wet where I had signed my name. It was just a piece of paper, but it weighed less than a feather. I capped my pen, sliding it into my purse. I was officially free. Mind if I join you? A voice asked. I looked up to see Eric. He looked different. The naive softness was gone, replaced by a sharper, more guarded edge. He slid into the chair opposite me. He did not look angry. He looked relieved. I just wanted to say thank you. Morgan, he said, folding his hands on the table. Most people would have let me walk off that cliff. You saved me from a life of absolute misery. I owe you. You owe me nothing. Eric, I replied, sipping my coffee. You were collateral damage. I am just glad you got out. He smiled, a genuine expression this time. Actually, I wanted to discuss something else. My family is launching a new venture capital wing. We need a director of risk assessment, someone who can spot a lie in a spreadsheet from a mile away. Someone ruthless. He slid a business card across the table. I think you are the only person for the job. I took the card. It was an offer that would double my salary. I will think about it, I said. As Eric left, I looked out the large plate glass window. A delivery bicycle skidded to a halt at the curb. The rider was struggling with a large, insulated backpack. He took off his helmet to wipe the sweat from his forehead. It was Travis. He looked terrible. His hair was thinning, and he wore a stained windbreaker instead of his bespoke suits. He was blacklisted from every architecture firm on the East Coast. Now, he was delivering lukewarm salads to the people he used to dine with. He looked up and saw me through the glass. He froze. His eyes widened, filled with shame and a desperate, hungry regret. He took a step toward the door, then stopped. He knew there was no bridge left to cross. I looked at him, waiting for the hate to rise up. But there was no hate. There was no anger. There was only a cold, distant pity. He was a man who had held a diamond in his hand and thrown it away to pick up a piece of plastic because it was shiny. I realized then that my value did not come from being his wife. It did not come from fixing his mistakes or building his ego. My value was in my resilience. I was the storm that cleared the air. I stood up, adjusting my blazer. I walked out of the cafe, past Travis, without even turning my head. The Boston air was crisp and smelled of salt and possibility. I pulled out my phone and dialed my assistant. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "Book the tickets. Paris, Rome, Vienna, first class, and book the best hotels. I am finally taking that trip. The one you postponed for 6 years," Sarah asked. "Yes," I said, smiling at the sun. "But this time, I am going alone." I walked down to the harbor's edge. The water was gray and choppy. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the simple gold wedding band. It felt heavy, burdened with 6 years of lies. I did not hesitate. I threw it as hard as I could. It caught the light for a brief second, a tiny spark of gold against the vast blue sky. Before it hit the water and vanished, the surface rippled once, then smoothed over. The past was at the bottom of the ocean. I turned my back on the water and walked into my future. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed seeing justice served as much as I enjoyed writing it. Please comment down below and let me know where you are listening from. I love reading your thoughts and connecting with you all. If you want more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories. Like this video and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.